you so much for coming besides our rainy days. So today's event is the first one for our PhD Career Beyond Academia series. So we would like to provide opportunity for our PhD student and postdoc or whoever interested in the PhD career and to see what the career option could happen and also have the chance to talk to our wonderful PhD alumni from Brown about any topic you like. So without further delay, let's just start the discussion.
Yeah. So we were gonna start with the listed questions. There's only 3, and then I hope to get to questions from the audience. And I guess I will start, I think, with Hedel. And the first question is, can you share with us your career journey? And is there anything uncertain or difficult that you encountered during the path? I guess also tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, sure. Nice to meet you all. My name is Hedel Marble. I graduated from Brown from MPPB, which I now think is called Therapeutic Sciences. They just changed their name in 2016. After grad school, I actually went straight into the commercial side of life sciences. So I took a job in business development and alliance management for Promega Corporation. After that, I went and took a role leading North and South American marketing for Paul Biotech, which is how I know about process development. And then after that, I led the in-house CRO business at Massachusetts General Hospital for the Division of Molecular Pathology there. After that, I went to Quanterix and led diagnostic product management. And now, as recently as literally less than a month ago, I am now head of commercial of a boutique CRO called Immunoscientific, where we are offering proteomic mass spec structural characterization of difficult to characterize proteins. We have a proprietary platform, and that's sort of what we've built our business around. So as you can see from that sort of list of things, I really didn't stay in research at all. I kind of knew that was what I wanted to do. It was actually spurred by, all of you might have experienced this, I don't know how many of you have taken, the NIH started requiring IDPs for a lot of NIH-funded students. I'm sure a lot of you are nodding. They have a tool on their website that's like a career aptitude test for PhDs. I took that and it told me that I would like 96% be happy in a consulting or business development kind of role. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never really thought about that at all. And then, so I think a challenge there was like, you don't learn about that here. Nobody's going to tell you how to get into business development or on the commercial side of life sciences. And frankly, if you don't kind of know what you're talking about, all those MBAs will not hire you. And so there's a little bit of that roadblock there, and you're sort of seen as like too technical, or what do you know about business kind of thing, right? And the reality is like, especially if you were involved with your PI helping to figure out priorities for the lab, if you've ever patented anything, you've thought about the business of your work, right? There's something there. You just have to kind of get into it. So I did that by doing informational interviews with people that were in the roles I wanted. I looked up PhDs that were on the biz dev side of things, on the VC side of things, to try to ask like, what did you leverage, right? And what did you do? And that sort of led me to my first career opportunity. And really all my career's opportunities since then have been as a result of my network. So that's one big piece of advice I'd give you. You have to cultivate a network outside of this place and outside of, R&D to really find out what else is out there.
You want to go next?
Sure, yeah, I guess I will go next. My name is Jian He, graduated from Brown University in the chemistry department in 2016 with a PhD degree in organic chemistry. And I think what Hedel has mentioned resonated a lot with me, especially on the keyword networking, because now when I look back my career path, the biggest challenge was really to find my first job in industry. Because when I graduated, or during my PhD study, I was very transparent with my advisor that I want to eventually get into industry, and he was also pretty supportive. But that doesn't guarantee that you will find opportunities, right? You still need to look for that. So after I graduated, my advisor and I kind of worked out a plan for me to stay in the group as a postdoc. for a year or two as a transition for me to kind of wrap up my research project, to get things that we're interested published, as well as look for opportunities in this area, basically the greater Boston area. However, it wasn't as smooth as I anticipated, because I reached out to some friends that I knew was in industry. They were all very helpful, but there was not immediate opportunities at that time. Right, so I was a little frustrated for a little while. At some point, I was even thinking, oh, should I keep finding postdoc opportunities so I can still be in the in the academia while I look for industry jobs. And the game changer was really another kind of random connection that I didn't expect, because that was also an outcome of a series of seminar that was hosted by the chemistry department, because most of the time they invite professors, right, in academia for these seminar talks. But there was one series that was about Brown alumni who graduated from chemistry department who are currently in industry. And our department invited them back for some seminars, so they talked about what they have been doing, and of course you have opportunities to connect with them. And one of these individuals was actually a vice president from the company I currently work for. And we engaged, and then he invited me to visit the site for a scientific talk. However, it wasn't a work offer to begin with. We had a very, I would say, great scientific discussion, but he was also being transparent to me. I'm not offering a job, but I know you seem to be a pretty good scientist, so let's see what opportunities we can get for you eventually. And I was being kind of persistent on that, so I was able to constantly follow up with him until one opportunity came out that I thought was a good fit, but still it wasn't kind of related to what I was doing during my PhD study. So he was asking me, is this something you would be passionate about going forward? Because I have a degree in organic chemistry. I thought I was going to develop small molecule drugs, but that job was in regard to biologics. So it's a very different area. However, I mean, I have made up my mind to get into industry, and this is definitely a very interesting topic for me to work in. So I decided to explore that opportunity, and I eventually got it. And afterwards, I think my career path has been pretty smooth, more smooth than I anticipated, because there are tons of opportunities once you get there. And my development was pretty straightforward. My managers has been pretty supportive of my personal development as a scientific leader, which is a very different perspective as a scientist or researcher. So I guess that's what I want to share regarding the first question.
Thanks, nice. Hi, my name is Jessica Emerson, and I have a PhD from the School of Public Health at Brown University, and I graduated in 2019. However, prior to completing my PhD, I was a project coordinator for about 5 to 7 years at the Center for Alcohol and Addiction Studies here at Brown. So I spent a long time working in academia and being in academia at Brown. And my current position at Clario, which is a clinical trials technology company, is pretty well related to what I did for my PhD. So a lot of my research in the context of obesity intervention work was using electronic devices to collect data about psychological and behavioral predictors of behavior change. And now what we call in industry ECOA, which is electronic clinical outcome assessments, is the department that I work in now, where we collect data via electronic platforms on tablets and handhelds for clinical trials work. My path was never really sure. I think I thought I wanted to stay in academia because I think most people in academia think that their students want to stay in academia and help them on that path, which is great. But I never got the sense that industry was really an option until I started looking by myself, and that was probably just as I was graduating and throughout my postdoc. I happened to get a postdoc before I landed a job in industry, and as I was applying for my first NIH grant, I was still reeling in this likelihood of having to resubmit it and feeling unsure about having that be the rest of my life. So I started applying. I think I probably applied to 40 or so different industry positions over the course of a couple months, and landed maybe 7 interviews, and 1 turned into an offer, and that's all you need to get started. This offer was at Clario, but was at a data manager position. I felt like I was overqualified for that position. The people who trained me reassured me that I was probably overqualified for that position, but it took me only 9 months to have a position open up on their science team, and once that happened, I was already so knowledgeable about their platform and what the company was doing that it was kind of a shoo-in to transition over to their science team. So my pathway was really helped out by them just needing to hire new data managers and having that be a position I perhaps was a little overqualified for, but me knowing that this was the type of company that could be my in. And now I'm actually still there as a scientific advisor, very much still using the work that I did as a PhD student and in graduate school. And yeah, I'll leave it at that and work on more of my experience after the next questions.
Hey everybody, my name is Dan Dubriel. So I graduated from here in the neuroscience graduate program in 2017. After I finished here, I moved to a postdoc at Mass General Hospital. All throughout my graduate school experience and for the vast majority of my postdoc, I was sure I wanted to stay in academia. While I was here, I worked with the Sheridan Center a lot on teaching. I enjoy teaching. That was something I really wanted to do. But all throughout my career, I was never really in labs that published a lot. And so I had kind of a poor publication record. And as I was looking at the academic jobs that were posted, they were not very good jobs. I didn't really want them. They were either not at the kinds of schools that I wanted to be at. I wouldn't have the kind of balance in the positions that I was looking for. They weren't necessarily, they didn't have the classes to teach that I wanted to, be involved in. And so I started to be a little bit less interested in those kinds of roles. Also, the work that I was doing at Mass General Hospital, when I chose that postdoc, I really chose it because I wanted to learn a specific model, and this lab was very good at that. And so I learned that model, but I also took the opportunity to learn a bunch of other skills. And because I was at a hospital, I was learning a lot more about translational and clinical kinds of research and getting a little bit closer to, developing medicines for people. And so I developed more of these skills that made me consider industry more strongly, and that I might be able to put these skills to better use in addition to kind of the teaching things that I had learned while I was here and that I was still interested in. And so I spent about 3.5 years in my postdoc, which I think was a great experience. I learned a lot. I grew a lot as a scientist. And then I started to consider more industry positions. And that's when I moved to Sanofi about a year ago. So I joined the genomic medicine unit at Sanofi. And so what we do is we develop gene therapies for a wide range of indications. And so I am still in the research side of everything. I am about 50% at the bench now and 50%, developing new programs or doing other kinds of non-bench activities. But I'm still heavily involved in research, which is great. And I put to use a lot of the skills that I learned during my postdoc and during graduate school. And so I'm happy to talk more about, when I decided to pursue industry and the things that I did during my postdoc that I think were particularly valuable. But we can leave it there for now.
Yeah. Thank you. My name is Stephen Crucioni. I was in the molecular cell biology department when I was at Brown, and I worked with John Senevi and Nicole Noretti. At Brown, I used that as an opportunity to transition because I was previously biochemistry, and then I sort of transitioned into a more computational biology role during my PhD studies at Brown. When it came time to sort of pursue what comes next after graduate studies, I was very much on the fence as to whether or not I wanted to do a postdoc, go into industry, and I also looked at sort of in-between opportunities, looking at the Broad, for example, as a staff scientist at the Broad. Actually, it was one of my connections, but from before my time at Brown, I went to Northeastern as an undergrad, and they have a cooperative education type programs where you do internships, and I had done internships at Sanofi Genzyme, and in part, my manager actually introduced me to the head of the computational biology group at AstraZeneca. So one of the positions I interviewed at the time was AstraZeneca. And I really had to decide, did I want to do a postdoc? Did I want to pursue like a staff scientist position at the Broad, or should I go and look at this AstraZeneca opportunity? I ended up deciding to join AstraZeneca. It seemed like a very exciting research opportunity. I'm still very much on the research and development side. That was about 5 years ago. When I joined AstraZeneca, I was working on their cell death portfolio and also working on some of their DDR portfolio. However, my research interest has always been epigenetics, and so when the opportunity came to sort of work on their epigenetics oncology portfolio, I sort of jumped at that opportunity. And so I've been at AstraZeneca now for 5 years in this early data science role, and I now lead a small team working on the epigenetics portfolio. And it's been a really, one interesting thing about my sort of department is we work all the way from target discovery through to clinical trials support. And so it's been a really nice opportunity to see all the different phases of drug discovery. And so I've supported like phase 3 clinical trials all the way from like all the way back to the initial target ID. And we work with dynamic project teams, so it's very different, I would say, than what you typically do working on one project in a PhD study. This year I've supported like 4 or 5 drug projects, so you have to kind of be a little bit more flexible and nimble, and it is a learning barrier. So it took me a long time before I could get to the point where I was feeling comfortable working on so many different projects with different areas of biology. But I do like the career choice I made, and I think it's offered me a lot of opportunities to continue to grow. And I guess one thing I really benefited from at AstraZeneca is a great mentorship network. So I've had a great set of mentors that have helped me sort of continue and develop. And some of those have actually left and gone to other companies now, but I still keep in touch with them and continue to meet with them and see how they're doing in their role. And they still give me advice in my career as well. So I think that's a really critical thing that I've learned along the way. I guess I'll move on to the second question. So this question is very much about like, what are the differences between industry and academia? What do you like the best? What are some of the challenges? What opportunities that you didn't expect or realize when you started your industry career? I guess I'll start with Hedel. Yeah.
Well, I was just joking with the panel earlier that like it obviously could not be more different for me in particular. I do not do research. I'm very happy to enable my colleagues to do research. It takes a decent amount of self-awareness at a pretty young stage in your sort of doctoral studies to realize that that's what you want to do like at this point. And maybe some of you won't get there now. But it's not like this path is closed to you later. You can always sort of leverage skills you're learning in R&D, in a postdoc, whatever you're doing, where suddenly you might decide, hey, actually the business side of things is interesting. It is really different, obviously. It is, if you have a PhD and you have some basic business skills, that is worth a ridiculous amount to companies. You know, it's funny, like once I decided this is what I want to do, and I did a couple of informational interviews with a couple of companies. I talked to like Thermo Fisher and Promega and, you know, a couple of like, I was in an engineering lab, so I gravitated towards sort of tools and sensors type of companies, reporter assays, that sort of thing. PerkinElmer, a couple of places. I actually had multiple offers to go and join those organizations, because it is about, on the business side of things, it's about your people skills. So something like doing an informational interview, people are vetting you in that process. And if they feel like you have sort of, you know, je ne sais quoi, or like right? It'll just fall into your lap in that regard. That can be cultivated, but again, it's so different from what you're doing in the lab that you have to kind of intentionally cultivate it if it's not something that, you know, you sort of have to like seek out opportunities to figure that out. There's a couple of ways that friends of mine have done it. I actually didn't really do anything official. I'm just like it's just like sort of who I am, and it sort of worked out. But you know, there's things you can do, like go and do internships in the tech transfer office. You can support other people filing patents, right, and like build those relationships with industrial companies that are looking for investment or, you know, development. You can really network with even like the account, like the salespeople that come into your lab, if that's what you're interested in doing, right? Like that's an interesting starting point. I don't have an MBA, and a lot of colleagues of mine that have PhDs that are on the business side do not have an MBA. I will tell you that it's not worth it. If you want the skills, you can just learn them on the job. An MBA is a very practical degree, right? So it's like, if you want to learn how to do business, just go do business. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like go get your hands dirty. Don't do it in an academic setting, right? But that again will require some amount of cultivation on your end, especially where I think even less than when you go to industry for R&D, your department and your advisor may not be supportive of what you're trying to do because it is so different and it is so out there and it is so far away from what they know. So just, you know, you have to sort of leverage your network. But again, like I'm not even getting into what is different because it's wildly different. But if people have specific questions about what working on the business side of science is and what it requires and what's interesting about it, I'm happy to answer that. If there's questions about how to get into it and how to build that skill set, I'm happy to talk about that too. So I'll kind of leave it there because it's like I said, ask me questions because it's very different. I'll hand it over to Jen.
Sure, yeah. I guess I echo with Heather a lot on what she has mentioned. Because the biggest difference I think between industry and academia is that industry is highly business oriented. So most of the decisions are business driven. So that's a very important perspective to begin with. My role still requires me to lead a team to do some development, some sort of research, but that's not all of it. It's actually a very small portion of my responsibilities. Because we support the bioprocess development, and we need to take final drug candidates, which are typically biologics, from R&D to our organization and develop a scalable process to manufacture them at really large scale so we can provide them to clinical studies and even commercialization, right? A lot of times we need to make decision on, we notice something that's worth exploring from a scientific perspective, but at the end of the day, we have to balance the time to get this drug available to patients to start clinical studies, right? Between what we can do as a scientist. So that's what I see as a very big difference between academia and industry. And there are also, something I don't appreciate a lot, for example, publications. There were times where we have done some good work and we really wanted to publish the work we have done because we thought that would be beneficial to the community. But because of some limitation around license or patent, we just couldn't do so. So it was a little frustrating because you can't share what you have achieved with a broader audience in the industry just because of how the business model work. So be aware of that. And there are certain areas in industry where there's less restriction. You can have more flexibility, for example, in R&D, you can definitely explore more and there are more opportunities for publication, which might be more similar to the, the work model in academia. That's why my recommendation is to figure out, which organization you want to work in within a company, because there are a lot of differences in that as well. Another difference that I want to talk about is really the value of I would say soft skills, basically interpersonal skills, as well as the breadth of your knowledge and understanding. Because to gain your recognition, to gain you a place in industry, you definitely need your area of expertise, right? You have to become an expert in certain area so that the company needs you, your colleagues need you. But as your career progresses, it becomes even more critical for you to expand your understanding, especially not only on the science side, right, the technology side, but also on the business side. You have to understand what's critical for the company and for the whole industry in general before you can enable this decision making and just match the resource available in your area in the company to invest in the area that you think is most worth investing. So that's another thing I wanted to point out. And again, at the end of the day, you will be interacting with a lot of scientists and non-scientific staff in any company. So that interpersonal skill is always a plus for you to find a good place for you to progress your career very rapidly. Although during my PhD, I don't think that was my strong suit, but I never made it my kind of shortcoming, right? I always was aware of this. So I was kind of intentionally developing that as we go, try to attend meetings, conferences, go to seminars, talk to speakers, establish networks, right? You utilize these opportunities to further develop your interpersonal skills. I think that's one thing I definitely want to highlight. So I will also leave it here, and I'm open to questions in the networking session if you have any.
Nice, yeah. I'll piggyback a little off of what you were saying about being a little bit frustrated not being able to publish and sort of get the work out there. And I wonder if maybe my company's a little bit different. So we were talking earlier that, so Clario is a clinical trials tech company, which basically means that, maybe with the exception of you, I think you said you're at a CRO, but not with the exception of you, all of these are my clients. So they hire Clario to provide certain tech services. And so as a Clario scientist, we, although the push isn't necessarily to publish in a peer-reviewed journal, which is certainly something we can do, the faster method to getting our scientific expertise out there is to put a white paper out or just post a blog, or, and this doesn't have to be so technical. It just has to show that our company is looking forward, our company has thought leadership in the market. And so there isn't, publishing in a peer-reviewed journal isn't the number one goal anymore. And we're very aware too in industry that not everybody has access to these journals, except for maybe in academia where your library buys all these subscriptions to all the journals. And so it's not as useful. So it's just a different way of sharing information that I personally, turns out I like that a lot, because you could spend an entire year trying to publish a paper, but you could spend almost less than a month just putting a 2-page white paper out there for anybody to read. And so that part is different, and I like that. But you do still have to have your company industry hat on whenever you're doing this. So I can give an example. Just last week we were in a meeting and an idea came up that was, we should look into this type of survey and what's the best type of quality of life assessment for various different indications. We always gravitate towards one very broad particular survey. It's not the best one to use across the board. And we really wanted to look into this, and one of our science team leads said, that's not really our priority right now. It's interesting, but there's already a lot of publications on that. Like, let's see if we can dig deeper into that and find something that's actually worth when it comes to, making sales and making our business grow, because that perspective wasn't going to take us anywhere. Although it was an interesting scientific exercise, it wasn't going to take us in a forward-moving pattern. And so you do have to edit your ideas a little bit, but it's an intriguing type of edit. It's a different type of mental exercise to think about, not only what's interesting from a scientific perspective, but what's also interesting from a moving the clinical trials field forward perspective, and the business itself. But those a little bit go hand in hand. The science, of course, needs to be there. And I get this sense in terms of the difference, right, between industry and academia, that things are still very attached to human health. And so that part feels good. So while you have to let go of this scientific pursuit of knowledge for the sake of scientific knowledge, you gain this, now we're going towards actual medicine that's going to be with people at the doctor's office within the course of however long it takes to get that phase 3 trial done. And that's also very exciting and fulfilling. So, that's what I'll say about that. Is there anything else about that question? Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so I'm going to provide a little bit different of a perspective because I think on the research side of things, when I'm in the lab, it's almost the same as it was when I was in my postdoc. In my postdoc, I was doing a lot of high throughput experiments. We do a lot of high throughput everything in industry. So, if you're used to working with smaller numbers of samples, you're maybe testing one compound at a time, and that's not going to happen anymore. But experiments are still experiments. You still need your controls. Everything is the same there. I think two of the things that are different are kind of the context of why you're doing these experiments. So the mindset is a little bit different. You're not exploring a biological question. You're not trying to uncover a disease mechanism necessarily. You're trying to build something. And so you're trying to build something any way that you can make it work. And it doesn't matter what way it is. It doesn't matter if it's the way that biology would say it. If it works, right? And so you just got to try a bunch of different options. And if one of those works, that's great. You go with it. And I think the second thing is really timelines. And I found this very helpful when I started transitioning because, in academia, you can work on a project that goes nowhere for a year. And by the end of that year, you can say, I have no idea what I just spent a year doing. I learned some skills, but at the end of the day, this isn't publishable. It didn't really work, but it was a year, right? In industry, you have milestones that you need to meet. You need to say, I need to understand this part about my drug candidate by this time. If this doesn't work out, it's done, and we'll move on to the next program or something different. And so you have that goal always in mind of what you need to achieve next. And so that helps you to really lay out a much longer timeline of the experiments that you're running. For the program that I recently started, I wasn't just thinking about the mouse study I was going to run at the end of this year. I was thinking about the mouse studies that I was going to run next year and the primate study that we're going to run the year after that, and getting those all planned out so that you know exactly what you need to start that study, and you can do the exact same thing in the mouse as you're doing in your other models. So it really kind of expands what you're thinking about in terms of your science. And that can take a little bit of getting used to. And I think one other thing that's a little different is getting used to the fact that you're not the one doing all of your science. So like I said, I am at the bench. I'm doing some of the assays that we do, but a lot of studies are going to be run at these contract research organizations. And so you'll be in meetings with them, you'll help them set it up, you'll design everything, you'll give them the stuff sometimes. But then in the end of the day, they're the ones doing the experiment, and whatever they give you is what you get. And so that can take a little bit of getting used to if you're used to doing all of your experiments yourself.
Yeah. So I'm also on the research and development side, so I can very much echo what Dan's saying. So we do publish, so we do actually spend a lot of effort trying to publish. It's not our primary focus, though. Our primary focus is kind of similar to what Dan's saying around progressing drug projects to milestones. I think one of the biggest learnings and sort of challenges that I had where in a PhD project you're working in a lab, you're typically working on your own research project. You might be working with one or two collaborators, but in industry, at least in our department, we're on these more dynamic drug teams, and you're basically working with the whole team of experts in their own area towards a common goal. And I think through that experience, you have to develop and also work on those soft skills that Jian mentioned. I think that's really critical, and it does take a lot of effort, especially, at least for me, I have had to focus on that to some extent, and sort of in my sort of effort to transition to being a line manager and then now trying to be more as a mentor and a coach. I've taken courses on this aspect, and it's been something you really need to focus on. I don't think that's an area of emphasis so much, at least for me in my graduate studies. I think most of you, if you decide to go into industry, you will eventually be leaders in industry. And so I think that's something to think about. And how do you cultivate those other soft skills to help you, both being a mentor and then also learning how to progress to the next phase of your career. Another good thing I think about industry is there's a lot of flexibility. So once you are in industry, you also create individual development plans. And that means like if I wanted to go into business development, I could make those steps in industry. So it doesn't really necessarily limit me in progressing on the career track that I'm in. So I can, now that I'm in industry, there's a lot of opportunities for me to do secondments in different departments, try different things, and make even really radical career switches if that's what I wanted to do. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I think in academia there might not be as much of that flexibility. I work in a global company too, so it's interesting to see how different countries are set up. I mean, in the U.S., it's sort of difficult to go from academia to industry and then maybe go back to academia. You probably heard that it's hard to go back once you go into industry. It's actually more common in countries like Europe. We've had a lot of team members leave and go back to academia, so it's not necessarily like a blocker. And I do know of professors now that have gone back, professors of high profile professors that have gone to industry, and then also people in industry going back into academia in the US. So I do think it's becoming more, less of a blocker, but just to be aware there is flexibility if that's something you are interested in. Sort of it also gives you a broader perspective in industry. I've seen a lot of different alternative career paths that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. And I also encourage my team members to consider, like, what is it you really want to do? You don't have to be developing a career path similar to mine. You could go, for example, if you're interested in business, go and do those secondments and learn that side of industry. Yeah.
There's one comment I'll make, if that's okay, Stephen.
Yeah.
I feel like the key takeaway from all of this that I'm getting, and that you all probably are getting too, is that, first of all, industry is not a monolith. So it's like we tend to, like in academia, tend to think of it as like industry, but there's like a million things that you can do that are within that structure, right? I work for a tiny startup right now. I've worked for like 10,000 person companies, multinational companies too. It's sort of up to you where you end up, right? And that all is going to have a different flavor. And then to Stephen's point, within that company, where you work and what department you work in will also shape your work experience, right? So there's just some amount of like, you can pretty much do anything you want in industry, right? Like, it's not like industry is like you go to do R&D at a pharma company, right? Like, there's like way more than that. And the other thing that I think that Dan pointed out is that science is not your ability to operate an instrument or do a technique really well. Science is your ability to take data that you're given and synthesize that into something valuable for your company, right? That's especially true for industry. I actually think it's true in academia at institutions like Mass General. Having been at Mass General, probably same for you. I was really shocked at like, oh, just send it out, like just pay for that. Why are you learning? Why are you trying to figure out how to do that? That to me was like, wait, but that's science. And it's like, no, that's not, nobody cares. Like, just get it done. Doesn't matter who does it, just go get the data and make something of it, right? So you're not learning, like, I know how to do this technique. Knowing how to do it will certainly help you vet other people that you might ask to help you to do that work. Like, you might vet a CRO based on what you know about that technique, but your value is not that. Your value is your ability to take the data and synthesize it. That's true across the board. Like, doesn't matter what part of industry you're working in. That's what people hire you for.
Yeah, and getting a sense of one thing that I found really surprising was starting to understand that I had a whole access to my whole company, and I constantly am learning, oh, there's a whole department for that. Like, you don't have to do that yourself. In fact, that's not your job. Go call somebody in that department and they will help you do that. And that part feels really, it's like you're not just yourself anymore. I think you get this sense in academia where it's like you want to sort of grow up to be the leader of your own lab, and you want to have, your lab mates and your RAs helping you out in your lab and growing your lab, and that's sort of like the pinnacle. But now that I'm at a very large company, like, I am no longer the pinnacle, but it kind of feels a little more safe. It feels good to know I have a whole team of people who will do that thing for me, or we have a whole company that we sort of resource that out to. It's a lot less stressful in a way, even though the timelines are perhaps more stressful. There is a little bit more of a balance in that sense.
Okay, so I guess we'll go on to the last question, then we'll open up for questions from the audience. So looking back at your PhD study, are there things that you could have done differently or known that would have made the career transition to industry easier?
I'm not going to say I wouldn't have done it. I'll stop just short of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like having a PhD is extremely valuable because, again, your value from your PhD is not I learned how to do X. It's I now know how to take data and make something of it. I know how to project manage long and arduous projects. Mm-hmm. I know how to prioritize, and especially where you've had to maybe kill one of your projects as part of your thesis. I brought that up all the time in interviews where I was like, look, I know how to do risk management. I had to kill my pet project because it just wasn't going to result in a paper, right? Like that type of stuff is I think really valuable. That said, I think I'll say it again. Academic graduate programs in the United States especially you are an apprentice for the academic system, right? You are apprenticed to a professor. You are learning how to be a professor, right? Whether it's, and especially at an institution like Brown, you are learning how to be a professor at a Research One institution in the United States, right? But let's be real, how many of those positions exist, number one? Mm-hmm. And number two, that's not what everyone wants to do with that degree. And so I think, what I wish I probably would have done more is been even more proactive about learning the skills that I needed to be successful so that some of my earlier jobs wouldn't have been so painful. Not that they were painful, but there was a lot of learning on the job that I was doing. And I had to be really intentional about it and go and, shadow people at different parts of the company. I mean, I think you all highlighted that of going and doing whether it's a formal sort of internship type of thing that you're doing, or you're just sort of asking, hey, can I just watch you do your job a little bit? Mm-hmm. I had to do that while I was working full time. I was trying to do the job that I was hired to do, right? And essentially it ended up being sort of in some respects, free labor, right? For whatever department I was sort of shadowing because I didn't learn that stuff in grad school. So I think that's one thing I would have done differently is tried to cultivate that experience. Now, that comes with challenges, especially if what you are trying to cultivate for yourself is not what your advisor had in mind for what he or she would like you to do after grad school. So you sometimes have to do that in stealth mode, but I think it's well worth the time now.
I like that. Yeah.
Not that I'm not a stealthy person, so it was pretty hard for me to do that, but I still did it. And actually I kind of did it a little bit defiantly. I was just I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go learn about this. I still got blocked in certain instances for maybe more involved things I wanted to do. But for example, Brown has that great open curriculum, right, where you can go and get a master's degree, at the same time as you're getting your PhD. You can apply to that program, and I think that's a cool program if your advisor lets that happen. In some cases, that it was not allowed. But yeah, seek out the experiences of other stuff. Talk to people that are doing stuff that you would never have thought you could do, or that you would want to do. Because you don't know whether it might resonate with you somehow. It's worth the conversation. It takes an hour, buy somebody a cup of coffee and ask them what they're doing, right? What made you do it? Especially where, look up people that have PhDs that have job titles you've never heard of, mm-hmm. and ask them how they got there. Ask them why. Ask them what they're doing. Why do they like it? You're never going to learn about it here. That's just the reality. Except through programs like this, because you have Career Lab and you have Ji-Chun, who's great. But, your advisor is not going to tell you about this. A, because they don't know, and B, because they're being tasked with training the next professors, right? That's their job. So you're only going to learn about that.
Well said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that the other thing, you already have a network. That's this thing I think a lot of people don't realize in grad school. This is a great program. There's a lot of alumni. I remember asking my thesis advisor that I might be interested in industry. Do you know anyone in industry? And he said no. And then I told him that all of his former alums are in industry in this lab. And so, but anyway, so that's what I mean. That when you go to conferences, there are companies at those conferences.
Yes.
So we go to conferences regularly. Those relationships that you make along the way, and also your former alums through your labs that you've been in, they're a great starting network. So reach out to those people, I think. Yeah. Network is really key to get your foot in the door, I think. Yeah.
There's a whole world of pharma conferences out there that you might not have looked up before, but there's a huge world of them.
I think another thing that I just wanted to mention is because I was so set on academia, and that's the route that I wanted to go, I really think I needed to go through that process of trying and not really, quote unquote, making it, or, finding one of those positions that I didn't actually really want anyway, because I'm really glad I made the transition. So I would say it's okay to change your mind partway through. You can go and get a postdoc and do that postdoc for a while and then realize you've developed skills that you want to use somewhere else, or to realize that the academia job is not actually for you. And it's completely fine to stay in research. You can have really great career paths doing research at the bench, in industry. You can lead a team, you can lead projects, you can do almost everything that you can do in academia, you can do in industry, at the bench, and in research. And it's okay, it's fine. You can go all the way through and get an offer for an academic position and then say no and take an industry job. That's completely fine. There are people that I work with that actually did that. They got the salaries that for their academic jobs, and they said, this industry job is offering me quite a lot more for less work. So they took that route, and they've been very happy ever since. Not that the academia people wouldn't be happy, but
The money thing is real, folks.
It is real.
I'm just gonna put that out there.
There are industry postdocs. That's a great
there are
option.
Yes.
industry
Yeah.
postdocs.
We hire quite a few postdocs, so they are also better paying than academic postdocs. You get health care and 401k and all sorts of stuff. So I think that's another good option if you are thinking that you want to do a postdoc and you like to go into industry.
One of my coworkers did her postdoc at Sanofi in the team and then she converted to a full-time employee after that. So it's a great way to kind of get your foot into a door and see, if you like that company, if you like that team that you're working with, and then if it clicks, you can just continue on doing what you were doing.
We still hire a lot of academic postdocs too. I think the postdoc is still a good option if you are still on the fence of like, do I want to go into industry versus becoming a professor? You could still do a research postdoc and not worry that it might hamper your efforts to say go into industry. You probably want to pick your postdoc though to being something a bit more translational or like in the area you want to go into, if you to leave that option open, because we're much more likely to hire someone like, at least for me, in oncology research for an oncology position. So that sort of thing. If you're interested in plant sciences and you potentially want to go into agriculture, then that's like also an option. Like try to pick the postdoc, I would say, to leave the options open.
Yeah, and maybe speaking of industry postdoc opportunities, it's definitely a great opportunity for you to get into industry, to connect, right? And to kind of understand the business and what kind of technical skills you would need in a specific position. And then typically they would be considered as great candidate for permanent positions going forward. However, I just want to point out that there are other programs in addition to industry postdocs, such as summer interns, co-op programs. Well, it's not really a full postdoc term. It's more like, for example, for some intern, it's only 3 months. In a specific summer, for co-op, it's typically a little longer. Typically, it's 6 months. And these are the things you might talk to your advisor for and see if they will be on board with this kind of option. Because this is something I didn't consider when I was in my PhD training. And based on my experience in industry so far, these are awesome programs to get into industry, to network with people in the industry so that you would be considered for future opportunities, right? So that's something you can definitely look into. And my experience so far is that a lot of times it's actually very difficult for us to find good candidates for this intern or co-op programs, surprisingly, because we do have funding for such programs, but at the end of the day, we just couldn't find great candidates. And then now you guys are out there, you guys are PhD candidates, you guys will be considered. But there seems to be some mismatch or some gaps in this information. So just wanted to point this out to people.
Yeah, it is really hard to hire. I don't know like how much you guys are feeling that.
Hiring
I've had
is
positions
hard.
open for like 8 months, 9 months trying to find the right person. The jobs are out there.
Yeah.
And we're looking, to John's point, we're looking for you. They're out there. You have to sort of, what I've noticed a lot of the applicants do is they're not positioning their skills right. So it's really hard for me looking at a resume to be like, I could do the work of trying to connect the dots myself, but, I'm sort of like going through resumes trying to be like, who's got what I think I need, right? And if you can't help me draw that picture, if you can't help me connect the dots, I'm that's gonna be tough. That's my big advice too, is like make sure you're applying, but like tailor your resume and stuff. Like you don't have to write a big long cover letter. Sometimes that helps if you really need to tell a story, but just like think about what is translational about your job and just reach out. Like if somebody sent me a message on LinkedIn and said like, hey, I saw that you have this position open. Like, I feel like I have these skills. Do you mind taking a look at my resume? I would welcome a quick conversation like that, just so I can quickly assess a person, rather than like trying to draw something from the resume, right? Like, so that's a big, again, like network, right? Use your network. Try to reach out to people and connect on a human level, because you're more than what's on that page.
Yeah, read a lot of job postings. Like, get familiar with what that language sounds like, because it's not the language of a CV. Yep. Nobody wants to read your CV. I ended up taking all of my publications off, and I made my resume 1 page, and that was painful. And the other painful thing was just coming to the realization that I was never going to publish anymore from my dissertation, and you got to be able to let that go, and start building a new type of resume with different language that still draws from your experience, but is talked about in a different way that makes sense to industry and business in general.
I'm guessing you guys still look for papers.
Yeah. So I was going to say that. If you want to go into R&D, definitely leave your publications on there.
Well, there
That's
you
a
go.
big thing I look at. But there is a difference in the skills that you want to put forward. And then another thing, when interviewing, we do look at soft skills as a big measure of like, is the person the right fit? Could they lead a team? How are they going to interact with project teams? And also like how we look at like their decision making. We often do almost like sometimes we'll even do like these example challenges to people. And a lot of these challenges are unlike, they're usually challenges that don't have good answers. So there's stuff we struggle to answer ourselves. So it's almost like, how do you work through a problem that might not have a good solution? So that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
I do that too. I always do a sample, like an assessment like that. And it's not like, you'll encounter this a lot, and it's not the company trying to extract free work out of you, I promise. I usually include it as something we've already figured out, but I need to see how you would have approached it if you're going to join the team, right? Because it has to jibe with, and it has almost nothing to do, I don't know if you feel this way, but for me, it doesn't really have that much to do with whether the person has the ability. Like, it's like you have a PhD, you have the ability. That's not the question. The question is, does your method match the way that this organization does business, right? Like, are you approaching it in the same way as everybody else? Because at a company, and I think this is probably another big difference between academia and industry, it's truly, you are not working alone. You are dependent on other people are dependent on you. So you have to work well with other people, and my God, you have to make people trust you, and you have to build those trust relationships with all those people. It's super important. Business is like 99% about, and by business I mean just like industry overall. R&D is a business, believe me, even in academia. It's about glad handing more than it is about like so many other things. People need to see you as a person and need to believe that when they ask you to do something, you're going to do it, and they're going to be able to rely on you, and that you're going to do it right, and that you're going to do it the way that serves the rest of the people that depend on you, which is different than academia, right? It's not so much like you tooting your own horn, right? It's more about like, hey, here's how I can serve this organization, right? Here's how I can further this organization's goals.
Do you guys want to ask us questions? Open up. Yep.
I have one question. So I was very curious as to, I guess, more so for R&D, whether I know I've heard some things about publications and how to wait, but like, let's say someone's applying for a position and they don't have any publication, or they don't have a lot of publications, but they have a patent. So which one kind of weighs more over the other? And the second question is more so in terms of responsibilities being a scientist in the bank industry. I know, like you all mentioned about like time, then like everything else is flexible, but there are like deadlines. And I should know a little more about what this deadline is. Not this is that specific, but what is it like, and like if you're not able to meet it, is there flexibility? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think, my experience in R&D is I didn't have that many publications when I joined Sanofi. I had a couple, but it was mostly about the skills that you've developed and your ability to learn new skills. So oftentimes, we work in teams, and so we want to have people with different backgrounds, different skills that can all complement each other, right? So it's publications are nice because they allow people to see the work that you've done and that you're proud of, and that you're saying, this is what I can do. And so it kind of allows them to gauge on their own the quality of the work that you do. But if you don't have that, you can really convey some of those skills in your presentation or when you're talking to people, showing that, I know this skill, I know it very well, and I'm very good at it. I can also do all of these other skills with which I'm quite familiar, and I'm happy to learn these other skills if the need should arise, right? So it's really about how can you be part of that team. And then the second part of the question was, can you repeat it?
For the deadlines.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know how timelines work at other companies, but at least for me, so I recently started a new program, and the way we set these timelines is really based on what do we need to know by this next transition point. So do we need to know how we're going to deliver this? Do we need to know something about structure? And what are the studies that we need to be able to figure that out? And how long will those studies take? So if it's going to be a 3-month study that we need 6 months to prepare for, then we'll know in 9 months. And by the end of that study, we need to have our answer. And so then you build in some buffer time for analysis and things like that. But the timelines are generally for us based on the science that we need to accomplish within that period. And if by the end of that you haven't reached your answer, or the answers are still unclear, it's probably going to either be we need to delay until you can figure out what the studies are, or if it's the results come back negative, then you might just stop there. But it's going to be based on the science that you need to do to figure out if you should move to the next step or not.
Yeah, we do a lot of setting go, no-go criteria too, and it's all based on data. So there can be timeline flexibility. So like if a safety study had an issue and we don't have that information yet, we would wait till we have that information to make that decision. But there are definitely going to be points where, like, if you don't meet this objective on the project, whether maybe that be like some level of drug exposure, then you're just going to stop it because it doesn't make sense to continue. So there is a lot more. There are projects that just get stopped. Sometimes you get really passionate about a project and then it gets stopped. That can be difficult, but there will always be more projects. And in terms of publications, I also would add that patents are equally important. Like any really way you can demonstrate the impact of your science. That could be presentations at conferences, even things like posters, patents. It doesn't necessarily need to be publications, but publications are a nice way to have an independent assessment of your work.
So I was wondering how many of you guys had work experience before your PhD, and Jessica, you mentioned you did, and how you leverage that while you're looking for jobs afterwards. Because I know some of us spent a few years working beforehand. We don't want to get rid of all that experience and not start from zero post PhD.
Yeah, my work experience, because I was a project coordinator in academia, I don't know if I would really call that true industry experience. I certainly leveraged the fact that I was sort of boots on the ground doing research. And I think that could have applied just as much during my graduate studies. You know, you're being a project manager or project coordinator is a skill. There are multiple people that you are working with that you need to delegate to. There are timelines. There are, you know, it's about finding the translation procedure. So for me, you know, I certainly was able to say that I was not a student for all of this time. You know, there was a period of time where I was working a full-time job, but I think it was more the translation of all of the above that was helpful, more so than just not being a student for me.
I had a
Anyone else?
prior experience with internships at Sanofi Genzyme, and it really helped me actually get my foot in the door at AstraZeneca. I don't know how much they would have been receptive to me as like an interview candidate, because my experience was kind of more junior. I didn't have, like, for example, a postdoc. Had it not been for that little connection, they do help. But you don't necessarily need it. It's more about the network, I would say, and that could be also gained through meeting someone at a conference and having a good scientific discussion with them, or it could be reaching out to an alumni in your lab that's in the industry now. Most of you look at the former lab list and who's in your lab, and you'd be surprised to see where they are.
There's more jobs in industry than there are open in academia, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
But it is, I think, about regardless of what type of experience you're trying to highlight, it's about what is applicable from that experience. Like, I'll give a good example. I had an interview candidate come through that started his own landscaping business as in between summers in like high school and college, you know, and he like buried it at the end of his resume. And I was like, hey, like, what's this? You did this? Like, what's this about? He like led me through. He's like, oh yeah, I built this business plan. I had these friends and we got together and this was a profit sharing model. And I was like, what, dude? Why didn't you lead with that? Like, I get that you have scientific experience. That's awesome. But like, this is practical. Yeah. So, you know, like, I mean, okay, he was thinking like, oh, it's just my neighborhood like lawn mowing business. Like, who cares? But there was a story under that, right? Of like, okay, he like had the wherewithal to pull a group together and get them to do something together. And how did he run that? And how did they, you know, they bought equipment and stuff, right? They budgeted. Like, there's things like that where it's like, even that seems small, but like, I'm not saying you lead with that and you say, oh, I started my like lawn mowing business in high school, but like as an additional anecdote, right? When you're in these interviews, again, everyone's people. So people just want to know, like, what do you know how to do? What do you have actual experience doing that you can apply here, right? That's all it's really about.
Yeah.
I had a question about, so I think this might be, it might be a little bit more related to just where I'm coming from, like the background of my education getting here, but one of the things I'm really interested in, just for an example, is studying advertising. And obviously, like, advertising is a tool and it can be used in both positive and negative ways. And so one of the things that I have difficulty with when I try to think about what kind of role would make sense for me if I were to go into industry is, like, how do I accommodate my kind of personal ethos about, like, the topic that I'm interested in, and how do I bake that into the kind of role I might look at in the future in industry, as opposed to, you know, academia, where you're picking your research questions and you're kind of a little bit more able to tailor that towards what you're personally interested in. So I wonder if you can kind of speak to, like, how you identified the role that you're in, and how maybe the company itself or the projects you're working on kind of tie to your personal ethos, and like how you were able to identify that.
Yeah, so I think I actually did this a lot because, you know, I am who I am on some level, and I do things the way I do things, right? So it's all about finding the fit. And I think when you're at this stage in life where you're sort of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be my first job, there's some amount of you feeling like you have to fit what they're looking for. I would argue, depending on the situation, it's not like blanket advice, but you are also you're vetting them. Is what they're doing something you want to do? And part of that is just being unapologetic about how you would approach something or what you think is important or interesting, and like not trying to give an answer that just works for whatever you think that person is looking to hear, right? Now, obviously, you don't want to be like combative about it, and you don't want to say something like, if it's clearly not related, you know, then it's like maybe don't bring it up. But if it's someone says to you like, oh, so you know, how would you, you know, we answer questions about, you know, how to target X demographic. We use data science to try to figure out, you know, like what people might be interested in or how to reach somebody at a certain time, right? You know, and you can talk about how you would approach that, right? Like, oh, if that was asked of me, I would do it this way. I have experience doing this kind of research. This is what I'm really interested in. This is a new angle of looking at this. You guys are, you know, this is a novel way that I've developed of trying to arrive at this question, right? Like things like that of like, you are bringing yourself to it. So it's still relevant. You're still providing value to the people, but you're doing it, you're saying, this is my approach. This is how I would do it. And the style of interview that you're going to have, especially having a PhD, I think to Steven's point, you're going to be a leader at these companies. You're not coming in and interviewing for like the most entry level of positions, right? So there's going to be some amount of like, they're going to ask you how you would approach something or what you're interested in or what you're bringing in. You sort of can be yourself is like, I guess the advice there. Like, don't feel like you have to tell them what they want to hear entirely, right? Like, bring yourself to that piece of it.
Yeah, I think I would echo that a lot. So I definitely think this is more like an iterative process. It's definitely evolving as you go, right? Maybe for your very first job, it's more important to make sure what you can offer is a good fit for that position. But my experience so far is that once I entered AbbVie, I started as a bench scientist doing a lot of lab work. After a year or so, I figured that, I think I'm familiar enough with all the major lab techniques, and I do have a good enough understanding of the business. What's next? Now what, right? And I reflected when I was in my PhD study, I did a lot of teaching, right? And I also worked very closely with undergraduate student and graduate student on certain projects. So I figured, maybe I want to be a people leader. I want to work with people. I want to mentor people in an industry setting. So I brought that up to my manager. She was very supportive. She figured out some opportunities for me, including trainings and, for example, people that can work with me under my supervision. So that was naturally. But after a couple years, the question come back again, what's next? At that point, I figured, there seems to be some business process, for example, between the handoff of R&D project to our organization that doesn't seem to be very sufficient. There has been some gaps, and that has led to some delays in timelines or some technical problems. So I figured, maybe I should talk to the leaders in my organization or maybe in our stakeholders about this and how I can be a bridge, how I can create a role for myself, at the same time get basically endorsement from the leaders from different functional areas so that I can create the role just for myself, right, based on my experience, my skill set. So that's what I want to say. You may want to advertise that you would be a good fit for a certain position, but ultimately, I think you want to be your true self, and you probably want to reflect constantly about what you want to do as you go, right, after you have seen things in industry.
I had a question about, I think, Heddle called it kind of building the skills in stealth to transition from academia to industry. And I think you all have mentioned that that's maybe somewhat at least more difficult to do in like a pre-doctoral setting because the benchmarks that we're supposed to hit are kind of setting us up oftentimes in a trajectory to go into academia. Do you find that that's sort of the same sort of case in a postdoctoral setting where like do the benchmarks that you have to hit in your postdoc, do they kind of keep nudging you toward an academic setting and you have to kind of like break out of that or work in like a stealth sort of way? Or is it something like in your training plan for your K, you can put in XYZ things that will allow you to make that transition more easily? So I wanted to see what you all thought about making that transition in your postdoc setting and how to work within those benchmarks to do that?
So I think for me in my postdoc, it was just really about being honest with my advisor about where I was in my own head, because he knew when I came in I wanted to go to academia, and so that's the path that we were working on together. And then it took me a little while to really talk to him about this is where I'm considering going now, and really for him, since he was kind of a junior PI, and he was like, okay, that's fine. I can help you get there. I know I have these sorts of connections and stuff, but it took for him to know that that's where I was thinking about more. I think so in my postdoc, I did apply for a K-99 and, go through that whole process. I think a lot of those are specifically geared towards academia. So there is no space for building skills for industry. That's just not even remotely what they're going after, right? Because that is a specific path where once you go down that way, you are expected to go into academia. That's what it's for. But I think there are other ways that you can build those skills, and it's just really being honest with yourself and your mentor, and making sure your mentor, if they're not somebody who is supportive of helping you to build those skills, helping you to build those connections, then making some sort of a change. Because there may be some postdoc advisors, like there are some graduate student advisors or grad school advisors that are not really supportive of going into it. They feel like academia is the best way to go, and they try to nudge everybody towards academia. But there are others that are not. There are others that they don't care where you go, what you do, as long as you're happy, you're successful, you're doing great work, and you have, that's what they want. And so my postdoc advisor was very good. Once I told him that I was interested in industry, he helped me to start building those connections, building those networks within his network, and we started, changing how we were approaching my career trajectory.
Yeah, my understanding of the was it a K01 that I had submitted prior to changing to industry? I can't imagine a space on that application where it would have made sense to have part of the training be geared towards industry. I don't know if I could have stealth moded it in there to make it sound like you'd have to make it sound like this is perfect for academia, but have it secretly also be perfect for industry. You wouldn't be able to call it out, because those K awards are exactly for starting you off on a route towards an academic career. And yeah, I was honest with my PI as well, and just told him, look, I know I just submitted this K, and depending on the score and understanding that, like, basically if I don't get this, my funding as a postdoc here is unknown. I said, listen, I'm going to start applying to some other jobs. At first I told him it was for backup, and then eventually, as the K looked like it was going to need to be resubmitted, I told him, actually, I don't know that I'm going to resubmit this anymore. I've been getting interviews. It seems like this might be working. And he was fully supportive of that. I did sort of ease the idea into it as only a backup plan, which seemed to work well. I don't know how his reaction would have been otherwise. I'm pretty sure it would have been fine. But, there are ways to ease the idea in and sort of more guarantee that they'll be supportive of it, in a sense. And you have to reassure them. This will not take away from the project I'm working on with you. This is something I'm going to start working on the side. I still plan on hitting these goals that we had made together, and I still plan on finishing X, Y, and Z before I leave. I'm targeting a end date of my postdoc that we always had in mind anyway. I'm telling these companies that this is my start date, and having that established, I think, is helpful as well.